In today's episode, we speak to both Serhiy Kovela and David Roberts about building resilience into business. The increase in scale and reach of global technologies have had a profound effect on the business landscape. Listen to how a resilience framework can support your existing corporate structure to help you with future challenges. Serhiy is a scholar, educator and practitioner with over 20 years' experience in project management and business IT. He works in Europe and North America, helping organizations increase their efficiency through projects, programs, and the effective use of IT. Welcome, Serhiy.
Thank you.
David has worked in corporate and public sector organizations, leading initiatives in corporate management, marketing, sales, program management offices, and the IT transformations on a global scale. Welcome, David.
Thank you, Richard. Good to be here.
Welcome to this episode of Implementing Best Practice in Business. We are here to help you and your organization understand and implement global best practice to help you face the business challenges of today. Join me, Richard Pharro, CEO of APMG International, in talking to leaders and practitioners who have applied these frameworks and practices to boost their productivity. They're here, willing to share their knowledge and experience to help you learn from them so you can do the same to make you more competitive in today's market. David, when Prime Minister Harold Macmillan was asked what was the greatest challenge for a statesman, he replied, "Events, dear boy, events." I think the same is true for organisations. So how can you really build resilience without environmental context?
Richard, I think he was making a very strong point. And within the business resilience philosophy that we've developed, we are very much looking both outside the organisation as well as within it. And we've developed some specific tools to assess that environment which any organisation might face. It's based around the VUCA idea with volatility, uncertainty, complexity and ambiguity. And that's called the VUCA storm scale. So the idea within our business resilience environment is companies are always keeping a weather eye on what's happening, whether that's good or whether it's challenging. It doesn't matter. From a resilient point of view, organizations must anticipate fluctuations in the environment and seek to take advantage of them.
The environment is clearly key. Serhiy, would you agree with that?
Of course I would. I would also expand on it a little because when I hear the word environment, to me it may mean two things. One is the business environment and the other one is natural. And both actually are quite relevant here. So in terms of business environment, David has already pointed out, no business exists in a vacuum. It always is part of some ecosystem, of some landscape, and it's inevitable that you will have some kind of dynamics, interaction between those businesses. You have competition, you have partners, you have clients, you have whatnot, government agencies and so on and so forth. So you definitely need to keep an eye out on what's going on around you because chances are you might lose grips with reality. You might lose focus on what your clients want, what your competition does and how it reacts to what you do. And so I think to me it's self-evident, if you will. You need to keep an eye on the business environment. Now, in terms of the natural environment, I think it's also quite relevant, but it's implicit. You want to work in a sustainable manner as a business to leave our kids, something to, a habitat which is worth inhabiting, right? So it goes to the heart of everything you do, your sustainability agenda in its broadest sense, clean energy, renewable resources, ethical business models and sustainable business models. All of that taken together feeds into the environment. And so as a business, as an organization, you absolutely want to understand what's happening around you economically and business-wise. But at the same time, you want to make sure that whatever you do feeds into the sustainability agenda.
Serhiy, I understand the sustainability agenda, and I understand businesses are moving down that path to make sure that they have an eye open to, as you say, the natural environment. But if you consider business resilience, is it sort of similar, building resilience into a business, is that similar to an insurance policy? Is it something that you're putting in place in case it's going to happen? So you've got to have a number of different strategies or positions within the business. And if that is a reasonable analogy, and correct me if I'm wrong there, what is the premium the business is paying? Is that increased overhead? Or is it something that you feel will develop a return on investment by the sheer fact of building in resilience?
This is a really, really good question, Richard. The really short answer is, yes, it costs to build resilience. Yes, it is a premium. However, what you're getting for that premium is much, much more than just insurance. That's the short version. And a slightly longer one will go like, a resilient business is one which is capable not of just withstanding the shocks, but also it is capable of harnessing them, taking that energy and using it in creative ways to propel itself to a qualitatively higher, better levels of operation. Any kind of sustainability, you don't get something for nothing. You have to pay for it because you have to build resilience foundations in your business. You have to build the culture which fosters innovation, interoperability, self-driving, motivating workforce. You have to institute that. So for starters, yes, it's going to cost. However, it's really important to understand that you're not just buying insurance because that's a very focused instrument. You've got one type of risk. You're effectively transferring that by paying this money, and you're letting someone else take care of it for you afterwards. With resilience, however, you're creating this capability within your organization to say, to work through such difficult situations, and it's a range of situations. It's not just one particular type of risk. It's actually saying, we can now take whatever comes our way, we will use it. And what's important to remember is that it's not just the insurance. Other companies which might be in a similar position, if they didn't build their resilience, they will fail. What will happen to us, we'll use that to build a momentum as a pushing force. So in a way, this is not just insurance. This is insurance plus a capability to develop much faster, and it becomes your competitive advantage.
David, Serhiy mentioned competitive advantage in building resilience. Now, you spent a number of years of your career working in the public sector. So how would you sell the concept of resilience being built into the public sector with that increase in overhead or that increase in cost? And as a preparation for something that may happen, when you're not going to get that windfall of increased profit or increased business because you're in the private sector, your private sector competitors are falling to the wayside. How would you sell this to the public sector?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Richard. In fact, having spoken with people in the public sector, they saw this business resilience approach being first and foremost of interest to executive agencies, those agencies that do interface with customers, because one of our principal concerns is to deliver more customer value. So whether we are developing new products or services, practices or processes, or whether we are using them to deliver something, we are always trying to do it from the basis of, can we deliver more value? It's important in the public sector as well as the private sector. In the public sector, all these organizations operate on budgets. Budgets are always stretched because often if you take something like healthcare, demand is really limitless. So there is always great pressure to deliver more for less. And that's something that all people in leadership positions would readily be aware of. And with regard to a resilient outlook, there's always been, for example, in health, a large debate between the work of public health in seeking to prevent people falling into illness and for those who are involved in treating that illness. But there is little doubt that the cost of interventions in public health can have a massively better payoff in terms of the numbers of people who achieve a higher quality of life for a longer period than individual interventions. So for the public sector, where they're really looking at the greatest good for the greatest number, business resilience has a lot to offer them. If I may say, Richard, I contrast that with a private sector example, just by way of making things, clearer maybe. And that is that if you take an example, through our pandemic of an airline, I'd like to contrast Wizz Air with other airlines. So this is originally an East European airline that focused on being a low-cost carrier. Its whole focus was to be the lowest cost carrier and to drive competitive advantage in that way. But as part of that process, they started to build up cash reserves. They were able to invest in better aircraft, which again ran more cost effectively and increased their reserves. And then when the pandemic broke out, they were in a position to take up some of those airline slots that other airlines could no longer service and fly through the pandemic period. And so today they are the leading airline in Central and Eastern Europe. Now that is about managing resilience through the cycle, through the good times and the challenging times. And in all honesty, that happens with different periods of cycles in the public sector. So if I go back to my health example, every year there are winter pressures, and the organizations know that in order to get through those, they need to manage the good times, the summer, really well. So that's when they reduce their wards, they reduce facilities that they've got so they can save to deal with the more challenging times.
David, Serhiy mentioned agility. Now, I know you're on the board of the Agile Business Consortium, so you've done a lot of work in program project management agility. What is the relationship between business resilience and business agility?
I think that a good way to look at it really is to say that business resilience is an enterprise level approach to sustaining progress throughout the long term. Agility is really a methodology, a way of responding, and typically responding in a marketplace that is often already established. So there are patterns of behavior or desires in users, the capture of user stories, and how do we put those into a prioritized requirements list in order to ensure that we are delivering the most value we can in a limited period. But resilience goes way beyond that, because for us in resilience, we are equally enamored with people who are running traditional projects in complex infrastructure or large-scale environments where you absolutely need to do and commit to future planning, such is the complex nature of the systems. So for us, it would not matter whether the organization is committed in whole or in part to agile or traditional methods. We are asking them to focus on resilience. And what, if you like, makes resilience different is that we are looking to the sustainability of the organization as well as its progress. And we principally do that by ensuring that we're investing in the culture of the organization. So we refer to this culture as a PACE culture, a positive mindset, application of tools, capability and skills. And when those things come together, we can create elevated energy amongst teams, and it comes back to something simple, rather like, well, not simple, terribly demanding, but easy to understand. When you look into a football club, one dream, one team is the mantra in nearly every club. And that is all about being emotionally committed to where the organization's going. And that is analogous to our our visioning approach and the idea of an evolving vision of where the organization is going. So as people come together on that, they are able to perform better, whether it's in the progress cycle or in delivering foundations.
So David makes a good case about business resilience works whether you are, in his words, a traditional business or an agile business. Do you see the same in your consulting work, or is there a particular type of business that's more likely to buy into the concept of business resilience and make that investment?
Thank you for this question, Richard. First of all, I'd like to add slightly to what David just said, and it will connect to what you were asking just now. To me, business resilience is about sustainable progress at the right pace. And at the right pace here is absolutely key. That pace can be swift or it can be more moderate. And in that sense, when we say agility, so people try to use agile methodologies normally when they need to quickly react to changing environment. Client comes with a new request, the organization changes its priorities, there are things which are happening to the requirements from out as impacted by the outside influences. All of that needs to be quickly embraced, taken care of, worked through. That's perfectly fine. There are, however, situations where it's either technically impossible to use that kind of approach, or it's politically very difficult to use that kind of approach because people don't like it, or the management doesn't believe in it, or for whatever reason. I mean, there's a million reasons here. And so in my work, I often see that normally it's just a mix. There's no clear cut, oh, we're just doing agile. There's a scrum. No, this is not. This is scrum and waterfall and something else, maybe something altogether different, only endemic to this particular organization at this time because they're just coming up with it on the fly. So I think we all like to think in terms of clear-cut methodologies. This is Agile PM. This is PMBOK based best practice waterfall. This is something else. In real life, let me put it this way. Real-life situations rarely survive the use of clear-cut methodologies. They always require a bespoke approach, sometimes to a lesser degree, sometimes to a greater degree, but you always have to mix things. And so this is at the heart of the business resilience framework. We do not say that you need to use just the agile approach or just the waterfall approach. We actually say to achieve the right pace of progress, you will use whatever is right at the time, and we may suggest certain things, certain approaches or tools there, particular instruments maybe even, but we will never ever tell you this is the only right way to do it, because your circumstances, your team, your organizational, financial, all sort of contexts, that will dictate a very, very unique set of circumstances which will dictate the approach. And so, agile or not agile, it will depend on what is right at the time.
Serhiy, you made an interesting comment then, and you switched horses in your explanation, in your answer. You used the phrase methodology and you used the word framework. So, you've developed a business resilience framework, but then it's not one size fits all. So what's the difference between a framework and a methodology? And how does the business resilience framework fit with existing business practices, methodologies, or frameworks? How does all this come together when the rubber hits the road and the organization, the board's looking at investing in becoming a resilient business? How does it make sense of that? So can you help us out with that?
So please don't quote me 100% on the particular definition of methodology or framework for that matter. But I will give you my interpretation of these things. So to me, a framework is something which is more or less solid. There are domains, there are elements, there are certain things which make up that framework, and this is not debatable, and this is quite solid. I mean, these are the tangible outputs. Now, methodology is more akin to philosophy, so this is the way of thinking and applying a framework. So in that sense, it's broader, it's more all-encompassing. And in that sense, when I use the word methodology, I was thinking along the lines, well, the business has to adopt a particular tool, but when adopting the tool, it must adopt the thinking first. Without the thinking, the tool will not perform, because you're not using it the right way, with the right mindset, as David mentioned just now, with the right culture, with the right level of energy. And then their tools are secondary. They're really important, but they come after you've conditioned yourself to a particular way of thinking about these things. So methodology, definitely a lot broader.
Serhiy, should I help you with the rubber and the road?
Absolutely, please do.
I think that'd be really helpful, because I know, David, you've spent many, many years helping people understand certain methodologies or certain methods. So please help me out with that, and in particular, how your business resilience framework, PACE, fits in with what organizations may already have in training in their business.
Absolutely, Rich, and thank you very much for the opportunity to answer that question, because I am extremely mindful that most of the people who will take an interest in business resilience are in an ongoing organization with established processes and practices. They may be specialized for their own particular industry or their own company. What we've done with the business resilience framework is to create a framework which is completely modular. There are 22 elements within this 5-domain framework, and it's been designed on a basis whereby other organizations can look into it and say, do you know what? I find these elements particularly attractive. I'd like to do some of that work. And how can I take those elements and place them into my own organization, my own ways of working at the moment? So that would be one of our strategies, a progressive strategy, as we've called it, where they gradually seek to raise their level of resilience, business cycle by business cycle. Another way of approaching this is, for some organizations, they find that such is the changing nature of the environment that they face, that and they start to bleed good quality people. They bleed money. They're in great difficulty. They need to really just get a grip of what is this business that they're in. They need to redraw it in a structured way and start to make sure they're doing critical things if they're going to survive. We've referred to that as an urgent strategy, and for that they can adopt the whole framework and then work backwards, because what they've got, they have already established is absolutely not working. They may have months to run if they don't change it. There are other organizations who say, well, actually, we've invested very heavily over the last 10, 15, 20 years in what we're doing. But we do recognize, in looking at the strategy, looking at the business resilience framework, that there are elements within that framework we would like to use because we've got a particular problem in an area, such as we don't have enterprising investment. So let's take this idea and put it into our organization. And then finally, there are organizations that will say to us, do you know what? I think we're pretty good at what we do. We do recognize there's a need to improve over the years looking forward. What we'd like to do is to take your business resilience framework and say, what would happen under these circumstances if we run through a model of using our own systems and then we compare it to the resilience framework? What would the outcome be? And what we'll do is we will use your business resilience framework as a test comparator of improving what we do and test, improve what we do and test. And we'll keep doing that, which is maybe takes us full circle back, Richard, to your question about agility. Very much a test culture, but this is at the enterprise level. So whether organizations want to implement one of our 5 domains, whether they want to implement the whole thing, whether they want to implement it at different levels, individual or a department or a business unit or the organization or across their partnership network, whichever level they want to do it. We've deliberately set out to create a modular structure which can be supported with a plug and play implementation approach. And in that way, people who've invested many, many years in their business are not giving that up. They're just taking a small portion out and putting in something that they would like to test and prove is better, thereby improving both progress and resilience.
Serhiy, do you agree with that?
By all means, absolutely. I was only about to add a small thing here. In no matter what the scenario in any particular implementation, there are basic principles which are underlying. Everything is dictated by these 7 principles. It's one of the domains in the framework, and that is what makes it possible to expand the framework to the level of methodology. These principles, they apply every single time. You have to apply all of them. And David might want to comment on any particular examples of those principles, but effectively, this is the absolute basis. No, sometimes you will want to implement all of it, all the 22 elements, and sometimes you will just only go for a small thing. Yes, as David mentioned, we think we're pretty good at what we do. However, we do recognize that we might improve here and there. So we'll cherry pick, if you like, and then we'll try and basically just replicate what's in the framework using our own needs. Yeah. However, the principles must be adhered to. That's the beginning and the end, alpha and omega, if you will, of every one of those scenarios.
Serhiy, when I first saw the outline of PACE and the outline of your work on business resilience, my first thought was it's a new corporate strategy. But listening to you talk, it isn't a corporate strategy. It's something different from that. As you say, it's the framework within an organization. So what do you see as the relationship between building a resilient business and either an existing corporate strategy or a new corporate strategy based on the organization's view of their future sort of commercial position?
I think it's a really, really interesting question. It is something wider because, as we've said, it's the way of thinking about running and developing your business in general according to those principles and using those elements of the framework. However, the implementation, whichever scenario you're going to take, the implementation is definitely going to be a strategy. We are going with the exploratory scenario. We are going with some other one. So in a way, you're definitely going to feed every single time you're implementing business resilience, you're going to feed it into some kind of a program, which will then branch out into a multitude of projects, as we call them, value initiatives. We refer to them in the framework. So I think that's it, really.
Serhiy and David, many, many thanks for finding the time to record this podcast. I'm sure you've got a whole host of things that you need to focus on following the launch of your book and wider dissemination into the corporate world. A fascinating insight into what organizations can do to become more resilient, and all the best of luck in actually making it a success and helping people to be ready for the next black swan or two that might come over the horizon. Thank you both very much.
Richard, thank you so much. Hopefully we'll have some future illustrations for you.
Thank you very much, Richard. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for listening. We're always keen to hear your feedback and suggestions for future episodes. You can find all the information in the show notes below. Please visit apmg-international.com to find out more about our accredited training and the certifications that support them that are related to the topics discussed in this series. I hope you've enjoyed today, and I look forward to you joining future episodes while we continue our exploration into best practice and the benefits it brings to global business. Thank you.